Sunrise over Sirius. Morris's cargo ship was destroyed today. His loyal crew burned down together with it. They fought to the last, refusing to surrender. Shredded by frigate cannons in Sirius Prime's lower orbit. He was now standing here, a weapons trader without the means to procure merchandise and with a pocket full of credits that he couldn't use. Those damn pirate clans. The bastards he suspected were getting plenty of help from the Tazarian Empire, and now, after the destruction of his starship, Morrison was sure of it. The holes for ears were selling supplies to the clanners in bulk. Moreover, they deployed their own troops on the planet and had secured large parts of it for themselves. Their imperial army not only guaranteed the backs of the clanners, but they also fought side by side for them. The whole invasion was made possible thanks to their supply chain and starship patrols, who turned the job of people like him into a living nightmare. Punching through a blockade like that wasn't something that was unaccustomed to, yet each time it became harder, till this day, when his boys and girls were lost. As a Terran, Morrison cared much for his friends and family, and sometimes the border between those was non-existent. And again, as a human, he had the duty to make sure that all those races' uplifted clients were safe and free from oppression. He was a merchant of life. Morrison's job was to provide quality merchandise for a low price, as low as he could manage after his traveling expenses. He was a trader, specializing in all types of small arms, armored vehicles, light or medium tanks, APCs, and even the mobile rail artillery units. His entire shipment lost, destroyed together with his starship and crew. With a sad sigh, Morrison walked away from the improvised, marked with flares landing zone, and back to his colonist friends, whom he gave their money back. After all, without delivering them the promised merchandise, he couldn't demand payment. He was not the same filthy alien scumbag who'd preyed upon the unfortunate, pilfering their hard-earned credits. "I'm sorry, Morrison. We we didn't know the Tazarians had deployed another patrol frigate in the sector. If we did, don't bash yourself. Nobody could anticipate things like that. Now tell me, what do you want me to do for you, Grand Clarissa?" The frail-looking old woman was actually one of the colonists chosen to oversee supplies and deal with people like him. She got all of the money that each had donated to the cause and haggled with traders for better deals on vital supplies and equipment needed for the war effort. Smiling, she poked his gut and then asked, "Well, Sonny, if you can, do something about this one." She pointed at the nearby earthwork garage, where, heavily damaged, stuck out in silhouette of a strange-looking tank. Eyes squinting, Morrison noticed that there were a couple of confused kids wandering about it, desperately trying to fix the war machine. From the looks of it, none of them was older than 13 or 14. From this distance, the youth's desperation was apparent. Perhaps they indeed had mastered many survival skills, although vehicle repair was not one of them. Morrison shook Clarissa's hand and rolled up his sleeves. The vehicle specialist walked over quickly and inspected the wreck from up close. Soon he was scratching his neck, looking around. Where was the tank's crew? The kids stepped aside when Morrison walked near. The looks in their tired, baggy eyes told him that they were at a loss of what to do. Moreover, he saw blood. A broken human limb stuck out of a hole ripped directly into the tank's side armor hull. Morrison carefully climbed the vehicle and through its open hatch looked inside, inspecting the carnage. The mangled bodies of 3 women were splattered all over the vehicle's cabin, and he reluctantly reached down. That was a grisly job, but somebody had to do it. Being an arms dealer, he'd seen plenty of death throughout the years, while traveling from one battlefield to another. The merchant of life had to be on the front of it always. Otherwise, how could the invaded defend themselves against the invader if they lacked the capabilities to craft heavy equipment of their own? Hours later, Morrison and the young boys had somehow managed to fix all the internal damage and even patch up the tank's armor plating. A couple of scans later, and he realized that this machine was not a superbly crafted vehicle of war. He was, of course, told of the story. The engineer who was sick and managed to build it by himself before finally dying. Everyone knew what the tank's faults were, and they compensated for it in battle. Morrison entered the vehicle for the last time this day and activated its mainframe. He heard the voice of that dead engineer. The tank's VI was programmed with his vocal patterns. "All systems on. I am ready to fight." The boys loaded it with whatever meager supplies they had on hand, and an hour later, Morrison called Grandma Clarissa to report that his job was done. Turning around, but for a minute he heard the booming rumble of the tank's Tesla engine and screaming right after it. The 3 boys, after manning the vehicle, were now rushing towards the front lines. No matter how much he shouted, they didn't stop the tank, and the tank's silhouette soon disappeared beyond the reach of his vision. Angry and exhausted, Morrison grabbed a blanket, and after chugging down a bowl of plain vegetable soup, lay down to get some sleep. Sirius rose on the horizon, and Morrison was awoken by a loud, screeching sound. Metal was clanking with metal. Next to the garage he slept in, a large 8-wheeled truck equipped with a heavy crane was dragging the very same tank he'd spent the entire previous day fixing. It was hit again, this time in the turret, and the thing was somehow miraculously not blown to bits. One glance inside and Morrison saw the kids' corpses. The crew of that vehicle was not that fortunate as the vehicle itself. Grandma Clarissa gave him a somber look and again nodded in the direction of that tank. Morrison climbed in and slowly, his hands twitching, removed the bodies from the tank's cabin. He carried them over to the grave detail waiting outside his improvised garage. Comprised of even younger kids, the biggest of whom was no more than 8 years old. The somber group dragged one bloodied bag. Evidently, the colonists lacked even spare body bags and had to reuse what was left again and again. Soon the clank of shovels and heavy, tired breathing echoed from behind the earthworks garage. Little kids lacked the strength to dig deep, so they shoveled dirt on top of the lying on the bottom of their now useless trenches, bodies. Grisly, but they had no other choice. Before housing the inside of the wrecked machine, Morrison saw a bloodied number 6 painted on the side of the tank's holocyte. Hours later, after fixing the tank's VI, he understood. Its crew had noted kills when their mainframe stopped working, hit by a missile. The memory of their machine had remained intact, though. With awe, Morrison noted that the crew's tank kills were 14, making the total of that day and night 20. Before going to sleep again, and after fixing the hole in the tank's turret, he checked if the VI was completely operational. Pushing the power switch on, it chimed in, and again, with the cheerful voice of that engineer, "All systems on. I am ready to fight." Morrison's heavy feet dragged him to the closest soup tent, where a one-handed bunny fed the wounded and tired militia with one bowl of soup and a loaf of rye bread each. The man sat on a burned log, and hands shaking tried holding onto the bowl, but he was so tired that he dropped his spoon, spilling some of the precious soup. The bunny, a dutiful client, came and picked up the spoon. Pulling another, yet clean spoon from her pocket, she quietly sat next to him. "Patron, what is your name? I am called Glory." "Morrison. My name is Morrison." He offered his shaking hand and held the bunny's only bandaged paw. The client looked up at him with her sad smile, gray eyes, and filled her spoon with soup. "Come on. You worked off your hands to the bone to fix Defiance. The least I can do is feed you, patron." "But your hand, doesn't it hurt?" The bunny smiled and filled another spoonful of soup. Morrison relaxed his aching arms and let himself be spoon-fed by the one-handed bunny. Sirius's sun rose on the horizon, and Morrison woke up hunched on that very log, body wrapped in with some hole-ridden thermal blanket. In the distance, he heard the same dreadful metallic screeching. Evidently, during the night, somebody had crewed the tank again. Looking around, Morrison couldn't locate the 8-year-old boys, and, teeth gritting, the weapon merchant climbed the tank again. It was as he suspected. The kids of the funeral detail were there, their eyes open, looking directly at him. Morrison, mobilizing all of his sanity and strength to continue doing what became his constant duty. The day slowly dragged on, with the help of one other human who had some minimal repair skill, and the bunny, Glory. Morrison again patched up the tank. Despite the loss of her limb, the bunny nevertheless helped a lot with her very fast and precise footwork, carrying odd pieces of salvage for Morrison to try and fashion replacement parts for the tank, and soon the vehicle was operational again. The day passed, and Morrison again pushed the mainframe switch on. "All systems on. I am ready to fight." He basically collapsed next to the tank due to extreme exhaustion. Woke up the next morning greeted by Sirius's sunrise. In the distance, he saw the 8-wheeler crane dragging behind it, Defiance. Out from a blown turret hatch stuck a bandage-burned bunny paw, and Morrison shuddered. Stumbling, he walked over, climbed up, and looked inside. Evening came painfully slow, and as he turned the switch mainframe, Morrison was again greeted by the VI's cheerful voice. "All systems on. I am ready to fight." Sirius's sunrise woke Morrison, and next to him he saw the hull of Defiance. Its engine compartment was smoldering, and the merchant slowly stood up. shaky, blistered hands leaning on the vehicle's hull. The distant sound of battle was growing closer and closer. He could see the towering silhouette of alien mecha dancing on the horizon, firing at something with its beam cannons. The tank was absolutely fried. Armor melted, and even the gun mantle was bent. Yet, the defiant machine managed to somehow return back, and on its own power nonetheless. He took one painful look. 3 female bodies, cooked alive. Eye twitching, Morrison jumped inside and began cleaning the vehicle. Much later, somebody's hand picked up the collapsed Morrison and carried him to the nearby triage station. This time, he wasn't around to hear the VI's voice. Grandma Clarissa did. When she turned the vehicle's mainframe switch on, its creator happily reported, "All systems on. I am ready to fight." Sirius's sun rose again and shone upon the ravaged battlefield. In its southernmost end, a single vehicle was moving and shooting, surrounded on all sides by towering mecha. Its main gun molten and inoperable. Only the coaxial railgun allowed its crew to return fire. The nearest mecha was hit in the leg, and it exploded. The tank was moving on borrowed time. That meant nothing for the colonists who crewed it. Close, behind the battle line, a battered battalion of militia were able to retreat successfully thanks to the sacrifice of its crew. While they alone were fighting against one full mecha squad, their family and friends pulled back behind the tertiary defense line. Comprised of old, towed railguns, which the colonists had dismounted from the transport barge, and simple trenches, that line was to be their last stand. Just as the last militiaman leapt over the trench, one of the enemy mechas got lucky. A direct hit made the tank's turret fly off, shrapnel instantly killing everyone inside. This time the sunrise didn't wake Morrison up. He was comatose and slept like a corpse for 2 full days. In his tortured mind, he saw people begging him to repair the tank again, crying with bloody tears, yet the merchant couldn't move a single muscle. On the 3rd morning, he was awoken by a kick to the gut. Gasping for air, the Tazarian boot at his throat and particle beam rifle pointing at his head, Morrison nevertheless reached for his sidearm. It wasn't there. What he saw on the corpse-ridden ground was somebody's dagger, and he grabbed it. He no longer cared if the invader would shoot him dead, for in his mind Morrison had died many times over. The merchant slashed with his dagger. The surprised enemy screamed. His stinky blood splashed all over him. Morrison pulled himself up using the Tazarian trooper's falling body. With a numb and bloodied finger, he somehow managed to grab the enemy's rifle before throwing one look around. Morrison was surrounded by at least a squad strong of enemy force. All were lightly armed, green-skinned Tazarian soldiers, and all were laughing at him. Morrison closed his eyes. He pulled in as much air as he could into his lungs, aimed the rifle at least the nearest invader, and screaming, pressed the trigger. He was ready to fall like a Terran.
If you've enjoyed this short telling, then please consider supporting the Black Knight, the author, by checking out and purchasing his books on Amazon: Starshatter, Twin Sons of Corellia, and Treads of Vengeance. He can even be supported on Patreon, and you can find him actively on Minds.com. Not to mention, consider liking and subscribing to this channel as well. Thank you for visiting. Have a wonderful day. Farewell.